Hello learners, and welcome to today's lesson of functions and relationships, input and output values, where today we are going to focus on those practice and application questions. Let's go ahead and start with our practice questions. So the first question that we have been given here is use the rule and the given input values to draw a flow diagram. So we remember what a flow diagram looks like. Well, firstly, we have the rule in the middle. So this is going to be where the rule goes. And here we've been given the rule as to add 5. So we know that we are going to add 5. But what are we adding 5 to? Of course, yes, we are adding 5 to our input values. And we know that now that we are working with functions and relationships, those input values are represented by using a variable of x. Of course, you can use any variable that you want to use, but in this case, we use a variable of x. So the first input value that's indicated to us there is a 1. The next input value that is indicated to us is a 5. Then we are also given an 8. And of course, lastly, we are given a 12. So we are just going to use these input values to come up with the answer. Now, do you remember what the answer is called? Yes, it is the output values. These are the output values in our rules or in our equations. So we are going to use a y to represent these output values. And how many output values are we going to have? Well, since we have 4 input values, that means that we are going to have 5 output values. So let us use this rule and come up with those output values, or find those output values. The first input value is a 1. We're going to add 5. So what is 1 plus 5? Yes, that is going to give us a 6. Let's just write that y more so that it doesn't confuse our output values. So right, 1 plus 5, that is going to give us a 6. Then we have a 5 plus 5. Do you know what the answer is there? Yes, you are correct. It is a 10. Then we have an 8 plus 5. Yes, that gives us a 13. You are absolutely correct. And then that last input value there, which is a 12. Do you know what the output value is going to be? Well, if you are thinking of 17, then you are also correct, because 12 plus 5 is equals to 17. Let's move on to our next question. So this next question says, use the rule and the given input values to fill in the table representing the rule. So what rule have we been given here? We have been given a rule that says multiply by 7, and we have been given the input values as well. So in the table, we are supposed to fill out the input values, of course, as well as the output values, by using our rule. So in this table, where do the input values go? Yes, you are correct. We know that the input values are the ones that go in the first part of our table. And of course, that would mean that the output values are the ones that go at the bottom of our table. So what input values have we been given? That is a 1, a 5, an 8, and a 12. So we are going to use these input values again to find the output value. But did you take note of the rule that we are going to use? Yes, we are going to multiply by 7. So each of these input values is going to be multiplied by 7 to get the corresponding output value. So what is 1 multiplied by 7? Yes, it is going to be a 7. What about 5 multiplied by 7? If you have 35 in mind, then you are absolutely correct. What about 8 multiplied by 7? Do you have 56 as an answer? Then you are correct. And the last one there, we have a 12 multiplied by 7. Do you know what that answer is? Yes, it is an 84. And those are the output values from the rule that said that we must multiply by 7. Remember, we just take the input values, we apply the rule, and the result is the output values. The next one there says, use the rule and the given input values to draw a flow diagram. So again, we are required to draw a flow diagram. But look at the rule here. It says multiply by 2 and subtract 4. So this means that our flow diagram is going to have 2 parts of this rule. So how many input values do we have? So we can see there that we were given 4 input values, and we know the input values there are represented by an X. What are those input values? Well, 5, 8, 12, and 15. So these input values are first going to be multiplied by 2, and each of them are going to go through the process. Let's do them individually. So first they're going to be multiplied by 2, and then we are going to subtract a 4. So let's look at what output values are going to result from these input values. Let's start with the first one, which is 5. So 5 multiplied by 2, we know that is going to be a 10. So from that 10, we are going to move right along. We are going to subtract our 4, and our answer there is going to be a 6. Now, how did we get that 6? We said that it is going to be 5 multiplied by 2, that is 10, minus 4, that gives us a 6. Let's move over to the next one. 8 multiplied by 2, that is 16. So we take that 16 and we let it apply to the second part of our rule. So 16 minus 4 is going to give us an answer of 12. Then we say 12 multiplied by 2, that is 24. Now that 24, we are going to subtract that 4, and our answer is going to be a 20. And lastly, we have 15 multiplied by 2, that is 30. And we are going to let that 30 now and subtract 4 from that 30. The answer is going to be a 26. So those are the output values that are given from that flow diagram. Remember, we just take the input values, we apply our rule, and then afterwards we get that output value. Let's move on to the next question. Now, let's look at our fourth question. The fourth question there says, write the rule in an algebraic form. So as we can see, the rule has been given to us there. It says they multiply by 5 and add 3. Now remember, what are we multiplying by 5? And then we are going to add 3. And most importantly, again, what will be the result of us applying that rule? So since we are working with functions and relationships, we know that we are going to be working with the input value and the output value. So for us to get that output value, we are going to multiply the input value by 3, as we have been given as our rule. So we are going to multiply the input value by 3, and then we are going to add a 3. Sorry, we are multiplying the input value by 5 actually, and not by 3. So we're multiplying the input value by 5 and we are adding 3, and this will all result in giving us that output value. So how do we represent that output value again in algebraic form? Yes, we are going to use a y. And then how do we represent the 5 being multiplied by the input value, or the input value being multiplied by that 5? Remember, our input value is represented using an x. So that is going to be x multiplied by 5, and we are going to add our 3. And when we simplify our equation there, or our formula, we're going to say x times 5. That is, of course, our 5x. And we are going to add our 3. And that is our rule in algebraic form. Let's look at our last practice question there. So we have been given the input values and the output values. And from these values, we need to determine the rule to this flow diagram. Now remember, the input values are the x values and the output values are the y values there. So from the 5, we need to see what happened or what rule applied for us to get an output of 30. Now, we could say that we added 25 here, but now you need to make sure that whatever rule you choose will apply to each of them. Now, if we look at the next one, 8, when we add 25 to 8, it does not give us that 48. So that means that it cannot possibly be adding 25. So what else can be done for us to move from 5 to 30? But again, the same rule needs to apply with moving from the input of 8 to moving to the output of 48. So what do you think happened here, and what do you think the rule is? Well, if you can think of your multiples, then you would already see that these are multiples of 6. Now, when we take 5 and we multiply by 6, then the answer is a 30. Now, what about when we take 8 and we multiply by 6? Is the answer 48? Yes, it is. The answer is a 48. And lastly, we do have to check with all of the input values if they do give the output values. So 12 multiplied by 6 indeed does give us that 72. So there is the rule. And if we wanted to represent this rule in an algebraic form, we would just say that the input value is multiplied by 6, which means that our equation or formula is going to be y is equals to 6x. Let's quickly go to an ad break and then we'll see you just now.